This is 𝑺𝒐𝒄𝒂𝒔, and you are listening to the Narrow Path in the Floating Mountains podcast. This is a podcast that is dedicated to stories and tellings of my spiritual experiences and its relationship with mental health. Some of the stories I will be sharing will cover many topics such as the parallels in spirituality and mental health, ghost stories, dreams, tarot reading, mediumship, and more. Many of the stories I will be sharing are based purely on my personal experiences and how I have made sense of them throughout the years. So to those who are listening to this podcast, I hope that you will enjoy my stories and join me on the narrow path in the floating mountains. Welcome back to another episode of the Narrow Path in the Floating Mountains. I was totally going to say Narrow Path in the Floating Mind. Anyways, welcome back. For this episode, I wanted to focus on talking about divine feminine healing. And it's been a term that has, divine feminine anyways, is a term that has been thrown around a lot recently since this uptake in spirituality, and a lot of women of all races have been practicing this. And I think why it resonates so much with so many different types of women or feminine identified folks, or even masculine men who are practicing divine feminine, is because there are, the social factor, the emotional, the spiritual, but also the ancestral work. A lot of things going into it. I want to talk about it because I'm also just trying to grasp it a little better. I can kind of get it. I talk about it here and there. I create pieces about it, tattoo pieces about it. But I want to dive a little bit deeper into the meaning, the definition, how people identify it, how to practice it. And so for this episode, we are going to be focusing on divine feminine, healing it or practicing it, whatever you want to do with it, understand it. But first things first, right? The definition of what is divine feminine. Now, my understanding and how I've always interpreted divine feminine is healing the feminine energy within us. So with each of us, we all have masculine and feminine energy. It can be likened to yin and yang energy. I believe yin is masculine energy, so it is, there is no flow, it's stagnant, it's foundation, it's strong, it's it is the foundation, right? And then yang energy is the flowy energy, the intuitive energy, the flowing, the ability to allow energy to flow, to move, take action, and make decisions or act on decisions that you have made. And so that is my understanding. I might have gotten it backwards, whatever, but the two sides, the dichotomy of masculine and feminine, can be likened to that idea of the yin and the yang too. So of course there's a lot to be said about energy that is just in between, right? But I think that's a little bit too deep for me in trying to unpack it for this episode. And again, I literally just got done filming or recording another episode before this, and so I'm trying to get all my episodes lined up because I know I have been slacking, but I just can't do it right now at like almost 2 o'clock in the morning. But it will be saved for another day, maybe. I can't promise that I'll go back to it, but I think there is something to be said about gender identities and spirituality too. I just don't feel like confident that I have enough knowledge on it to talk about queer identities or gender identities to connect it to spirituality, and I don't want to botch it either. But for this episode, again, just kind of like talking a little bit about the divine feminine, and that we all possess that. We all possess feminine and masculine energies. Even the most feminine woman will have a masculine. And so, yes. So my understanding of it is that it is tapping into this energy of nurturing. When we think about the feminine energy, it's nurturing. It's the life giver. It is the ability to feel connected, to in a way like the right to feel pleasure, the right to feel like emotions, and I think in just my observation, there's this resurrection of divine feminine practice because it would allow people who have never been allowed to feel emotions or express it to tap into that. And so that is my understanding about the divine feminine. And neither masculine or feminine energy is bad. However, there's just more emphasis on divine feminine healing to feel more empowered in societies that are often patriarchal or leaning more into masculine energy. So I did look it up if people want to have a definition of it, and I found an article on the subject, and the article literally says, "What is the divine feminine?" And it's from the website 𝑑𝒐𝒅𝒄𝒂𝒔𝒕. Let's see. Here it goes. The divine feminine is the spiritual concept that there exists a feminine counterpart to the patriarchal and masculine worship structures that have long dominated organized religions. The divine feminine extends well beyond one belief system and instead can be used as a spiritual lens to balance our perspectives. The existence of the divine feminine suggests that complementary energies exist within each being. So they go on to say that men and women are, it's not as simple as like men and women are opposites, and that gender binary is a divisive and false tool, as colonial approaches to gender have routinely devalued the feminine in indigenous belief systems in matrilineal societies. I'm also one to believe, like as I was in school studying art and prehistoric art, you'll find often in prehistoric art figurines that are created to worship fertility. So there's a lot of fertility goddesses in prehistoric time. Fertility goddesses, goddesses that are symbols of the connection to earth or being nurtured by the natural elements. So even nature is connected to this idea of the feminine, because it being like a feminine energy. And so even in prehistoric times, in ancient civilizations or primitive civilizations or societies, that the feminine energy, the divine feminine has existed and has, in my theory, and just in how I have understood the divine feminine, is that it has preceded patriarchal society, and it is through patriarchal society, patriarchal practices that have slowly pushed out these ideologies or colonized these civilizations, these societies, and in some ways like eradicated ideas, practices revolving around divine feminine and goddesses. But I would love to read this whole thing, but I feel like as I'm reading it, it would be a really good read for people who want to look more into what the divine feminine is, and how you can channel that energy. This article also has an explanation for why the gender term, and talking about goddess and feminine archetypes. So they'll talk about goddesses that are just goddesses from different types of cultures. And there's an interesting section here about the sacred feminine, within looking into the sacred feminine in your own culture, cultural, spiritual, and ancestral traditions, and incorporating the divine feminine in your life. And so if you're interested in that, I will try to remember to attach the link to that article below. I know I've said that in the past, that I would include links in the description, and then I totally forget to. But if I don't, you can comment below. Let me know, hey, you forgot to post that link. And I'll try my best to post it. But I would say this is actually a pretty good article. It touches on a lot of the socio-cultural, political, spiritual research on the divine feminine. And even here it says the divine feminine is a non-denominational concept and self-exploration that restores a balance to our worship and spiritual practices. And that's something that is also important to know, is that the divine feminine also allows for the person who is looking to tap into that, to reach deeper, open up, unpack deeper their connection to spirituality or spiritual practice. And so it's a great article, and highly recommend y'all look it up. Even if I don't post it, it's on the website Good Trade, and it's an article that's titled "What is the Divine Feminine?" and it is written by Emily McGowan. And actually this was just posted on the 5th. How awesome. I did not plan to do that, but I guess it is the season for the divine feminine. But there is that. So now that I have gone over my understanding about the divine feminine and a definition on the divine feminine, just a little bit about how I've used it. And I think I would say that as soon as I learned about the power dynamics and gender roles in the Hmong culture, I actually was like not aware of like the feminist movement. When I did come across it, I could only associate it with like white liberal feminism from the 1960s. So whatever I had read up on it or what I have found on it. And then at the time that I was unpacking a lot of what I was dealing with, working with women's groups, Hmong women's groups, I definitely started to tap into the divine feminine as a way to, as an alternative to a way of living, understanding about my culture and the practices. But I think too, it is definitely what has led me to my spiritual path too. Because at the time that I was doing that, I was also doing a lot of like work on utilizing the skills, the different skills that a woman would practice in the Hmong culture, reclaiming that, understanding like why is it that we do all of these crafts, right? Like these types of crafts. And questioning a lot of that. There was a lot of questioning. There was a lot of trying to like find agency, trying to find an alternative way of being among women as I was becoming among women, and not trying to stick to those gender roles. Although now that I think about it, I think I'm very proud of the 20-year-old me that just needed to challenge, like, why is this in our culture, or why is this in the culture, that it has made me more aware of the complexities in our culture, also the people who mostly the women who have no choice but to subscribe to that too. And just literally understanding how oppression works. That it's oppression in the Hmong culture anyways, that it has also allowed me to broaden my understanding, and just know how to navigate it, know how to advocate for oppressed voices, oppressed people in the culture, and finding healthier ways, less confrontational ways, because I think you can still do the work without being confrontational. I think there are times that you do need to be confrontational. Like, I don't think you have to be, what is it? Like, I think there's a necessary time to stand up for yourself and really stand your ground. But honestly, there are just some people who just can't do it. You know, they're just not confrontational people. And I think there are other ways to also do the work without being confrontational, because it is a very complex system. But anyways, kind of like roping it back to the divine feminine, like I think the feminist lens has actually led me into channeling the divine feminine energy. I think in understanding social structures, that when I started to question it, I realized there was a lot to heal from too in my own personal experiences, that at the end of the day, I just wanted to heal. And healing in itself, I feel, is a divine feminine practice, right? To feel your emotions, to feel the the challenges you're experiencing, to feel, to resonate, to use your intuition in connecting to your feelings, your whatever you're feeling spiritually, emotionally, physically, that you can understand how to heal. You can understand how to navigate it. But I think it is what has led me to that, and that in healing, and the only way that I understood healing on the mental level was by way of emotional and spiritual. And so thus started the interest, or the curiosity into in exploring spiritual practices, and I think through that process too, I actually grew up being very afraid of like spiritual practices. It wasn't really explained to us, and so I always thought like, oh my gosh, spirit's scary. But again, just growing up, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed like the stories. I enjoyed just learning about it, but also I was like scared of it. But once I overcame that, I learned how to take this fear and become empowered by it, and using that to heal myself. And so this desire to heal utilizing like feminine practices, or even utilizing like the divine feminine lens to explore the practices and patriarchal rules, the social like rules that I started to understand the harmony that masculine and feminine can exist. Not to say that like, I don't know, it's still hard for me to say like, it's still hard for me to say. I don't know if I even want to say it. But I totally own up to my masculine energy too. If anything, like I'm still trying to balance my feminine and my masculine. But it's led me to where I am. And I think that it's been very helpful. Obviously, that's why I'm talking about it. So I have a list here that I wanted to talk about in relation to the divine feminine, and one of the 3 bullet points that I have is intuition, nurture, and emotion. And I don't know if I talk a lot about these 3 things, but elaborating a little bit more on nurturing, the ability to nurture and have unconditional love for others. That's divine feminine. Discernment, understanding other people, and even though they are lashing out, that you still have it within you to unconditionally with unconditional love, try to understand them. You don't have to be like a people pleaser, or even tap into that motherly role. It could just be something as simple as like some form of like mercy, of like, okay, I'm not gonna argue, they probably just need to be heard, and just letting them vent and just seeing where that goes. And I've done that quite a few times. I'm just like, okay, Michael, just listen. And it has helped. And then there's also, what is it? Feminine rage. I don't know if I'm ready yet to talk about that either. But rage is a part of that emotion too. When I think about divine feminine, though, I always think about Moana with Te Fiti. How Te Kā is a representation of feminine rage, and that Te Fiti is the divine feminine, and that you can be both. It's one and the same person. I think too, it tells a very like poignant story about how this delicate, nurturing goddess can also have the ability to possess rage and anger. And when I watched Moana, I cried. I cried when Moana was walking down the sea and that sea was splitting, and she was like, there was this moment of stillness, and she goes like, I know who you are. And how like her heart was taken from her. I was like, oh my God, this is me right now. That is my divine feminine being healed. That movie healed my divine feminine, y'all. You just don't know. But going back to it, the divine feminine also encompasses that, because it is the ability to feel, right? It is the permission to feel. And not only that, something that I also like to point out is that when you are also trying to heal the ability to like feel, like allowing yourself to feel the emotions, no matter how yucky or how delightful or how joyful or optimistic, like allowing yourself to feel those things is very much connected to the divine feminine. And for me, I resonate a lot with that, the divine feminine practice too, because I really feel that the divine feminine, my center for the divine feminine, is in my heart and in my sacral chakra, because the sacral chakra rules over fertility, sexuality, and pleasure, and creativity. And for me, it has always rung true for me to work with this chakra as well as the heart center to practice that. It could be different for other people, but for me, it has always been connected to that, because as a person who identifies as a woman, a biological woman, I don't even know if that was like important to say, as a woman, having a uterus, that this organ is important for me. I also have a very complicated relationship with this chakra and this organ. And so I think for me, my center of like divine feminine is situated in the sacral. It could be different. You know, someone could be like, oh, actually divine feminine is in like your elbow. But I'm like, no, I'm tapping into this energy and my sacral, because guess what? Fertility happens there. So everyone has a reproductive organ, unless like they have a medical condition where they don't. But even then, everyone possesses the divine and feminine, and it's situated wherever they feel called to work with. But that's just a little bit about how I utilize it, the divine feminine. And I don't know, I really didn't think that this was going to be a long episode. I think this was just kind of like a cute little like spiel on divine feminine, because I'm sure like it gets thrown around a lot. It becomes a buzzword. People don't people hear it and they're like, oh yes, my divine feminine. And we think about the divine feminine, and it is related to a lot of what is being put out there in mass social media, or what is being capitalized on, that the meaning can become diluted, and you can, with however much is being put out there, that it can dilute the meaning, the practices, the ideologies, and further dissociate it from its core purpose. And so, hopefully y'all enjoy this. This is a short episode. I really didn't know how much I wanted to elaborate on it. There's just so much information out there right now about the divine feminine and how other people practice it. People offer courses about it. People offer retreats about working with the divine feminine, but you can incorporate it in so many ways. Just even drinking a cup of coffee and you're like, oh my gosh, this tastes so good and so sweet. That is working with your divine feminine, because you are enjoying it. It is contributing to enjoying the pleasures of life, feeling it, that, you're doing it. But hopefully you enjoy this episode. And that concludes this episode of The Narrow Path in the Floating Mountains. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you can tune in for the next one.